The good thing about living in Corby is the community spirit, and you can get iron brew anywhere.
It's the friendliest place you can come across because they understand adversity and they understand when things are tough.
We've got plenty of wildlife in the town centre, you know.
If Corby was an animal, it would be a phoenix because we've risen from the ashes to be a fantastic town.
Mark Steele's in town.
Thanks very much and welcome to Mark Steele's in Town, which this week comes from the Cube Theatre in the baffling Northamptonshire town of Corby. Also known as Little Scotland, that must have caused thousands of rows between couples driving through here, hearing people talking, going, I told you we were lost! Because the Scots have been here so long now that even the people born here sound Scottish. Have you any idea how confusing that is? Hearing people go, I've lived here all my life, Bo. I'm Northamptonshire born and bred, by the way. I've got the River Welland running through my veins, huh? Even people who don't have the accent still have that Glasgow intonation, but talking in an English accent is really confusing. Do you ken how wee Bobby went fishing with the wains and got stopped by the police? Huh? One of the boasts of this town is it has the biggest sales of iron brew outside Scotland. I'm sorry, Corby, if that is one of your boasts, you really ought to raise your ambitions a bit, I think. We'll come on to the reasons why Corby is so Scottish in a bit, but before that I should say how much I love the town motto of Corby, which is, we're nothing to do with a bloody trouser press! We had a bloody great steelworks that was bigger than some countries. Do you think we'd bother making some useless trouser thing that no one in the world knows how it works, and it can't work, otherwise it would exist in houses and not just in the corners of bloody hotel rooms? Obviously that's written in Latin, but that is the meaning. You've got other things to boast about as well as the Scottish connection. According to my book here, Corby Works, looks like you all know, published by the Council in 1989, I quote, Corby is often described as the centre of England. There is a population of 30 million within 100 miles. Now, where else can you say that so many people are just 100 short miles away? So nowhere's far away. According to Corby Works, there is easy access to destinations across continental Europe. Really? Is there an underground passage to Berlin? Impressively, though, the claim was made when Corby didn't even have a railway station. Because until 2009 there was no station here, but somehow you made this something to boast about. For example, one tourist website bragged, Corby is the largest town in Europe without a railway station. That is brilliant PR, isn't it? To turn the fact that you're lacking something into a boast. No wonder the town was attractive to Louise Mensch. In any case, someone wrote on a website debate about this matter. The largest town without a railway station is Dudley. If you disqualify Dudley as being part of a conurbation and Newcastle underlined for the same reason, then the answer is Gosport. If you allege that Gosport is a suburb of Portsmouth and disqualify Kingswood, Newton Abbey, Hales Owen, Castlereagh, Washington and Dunstable, then the answer is Livingston. There are stations called Livingston South and Livingston North, but both are 2 miles out of town, so I wouldn't really say that Livingston had a station. But only by disqualifying that as well do we then get to Corby. Well, then a few people on this website write back to say that this bloke's gone to too much trouble, really. And he replies, well, if you saw the lack of quality in the official information, you'd see why my work has to be done. I think the confidence here may be because Corby is currently the fastest growing town in Britain. You're in a boom here, so you're a bit full of yourselves. You're a bit like China is these days. The self-assurance of an emerging superpower. For example, there's a company here called Dex and the City that describes itself as Northamptonshire's leading discotheque. And it has a website that tells us, over the years, we've entertained celebrities, politicians, even royalty. And there's a quote, "Wow, great mix. HRH Prince Harry." Really? Are there any others? It was banging. I was ripped. Princess Michael of Kent. There's another boast. According to the Northants Telegraph, Corby is claiming to be the friendliest town in the world. And as an example of this, they quote locals such as Lorraine Adams of Highbrook, who says, "I find it's the most friendly place. Here, they hold doors open for you." They don't do that in Kettering. And this does seem to be a common feeling, that people here will welcome anybody, not like the running dogs of human mucus that are the people of Kettering. When I went to the library to get these books here, this bloke started helping me look for them. And I said, "Oh, thanks for all your help, mate." And he went, "Yes, you'll find that we are very helpful here. Not like in Kettering." What are you supposed to say to that? I felt I should say, "Oh, no, I went to Kettering Library, asked for an Agatha Christie, the librarian stabbed me in the eye. Looking for books? What do you think this is, Corby?" Anyway, if you do find any books, you won't be able to carry them because you won't be able to open the door and no one here is going to hold it open for you. I found a website where people moan about towns, and I don't really look at it normally because it's not very nice, but someone was being horrible about Corby, saying it's full of thugs, and then someone from the town replied, saying, "Corby is a great place to live. People are polite and friendly and certainly don't stab each other." It's people like you ruining this country by constantly branding people. Just because someone wears a tracksuit, you stereotype them. I know plenty of so-called chavs that are polite and considerate and help the elderly. And I thought this is very touching, actually. And then they end this stoic defence of human values with saying, "Anyway, am I right in thinking you're from Kettering? Well, I hope you have fun reading this and even more fun shagging your sheep." Now, I know this is said about the Welsh. Why is this said about Kettering?
Allegedly, he was helping it over a stile.
Oh, no. Was there a real case then? Oh, that's what you don't want in your town, don't you? Oh, no, what's he done? He robbed someone's electric meter. No, shagged a sheep. Oh, no. 500 years now we'll have of, you know what they all do in Kettering all day long. In a way, the history of Corby and Kettering is as opposite as neighbouring towns could have, bestiality notwithstanding. Kettering grew up slowly from medieval times, then quickly after the Industrial Revolution, much more normal sort of way a town grows up. Corby was mentioned in the Domesday Book in Norman times as a manor of 40 people, though they were all very well catered for, as there were local shops in Moscow, only 2,000 miles away. What changed everything, I'm sure you all know this, was Stuarts and Lloyds started the steelworks here. With it being the 1930s, there were thousands of unemployed steelworkers in Glasgow and Aberdeen, so 10,000 Scots moved to Corby. Now, we'll come back to the steelworks in a bit, but this was where Corby became Scottish. It's why, for example, Corby has the biggest Glasgow Rangers supporters club in the world, which means you hold another record, of course, as the only place where the supporters club is worth more than the club it supports. Because for those who don't know, Rangers went spectacularly bankrupt. But to be fair, Rangers do take part in a very sweet gesture quite often. They send a team down here to play a friendly against Corby. And I think that's a lovely, generous thing to do for Corby to bother playing a team in a league as low as Rangers. Now, as soon as people came down from Glasgow, they started having orange marches in Corby. But, of course, some of the Glaswegians that came down were Catholics. So you've probably got your own Republican song. Though cowards try defeating us with treachery, guns and bribery, our brave old boys of Corby still borrow books from Kettering Library. There's an annual Highland gathering here. Do people here go to it? I wonder if you do it justice, because, according to the Northants Telegraph, the chieftain at the 2010 Highland Games will be Mr Tim Shoveler from East Midlands Trains. That's not a proper chieftain for the Highland Games. It should be a bloke with a huge beard and a shield screaming, "My blood runs blue!" But let's not be prejudiced. Let's see what Mr Tim Shoveler said when he was chosen. I quote, "It's a great honour to be chieftain. We've made some big improvements to the train service recently, which we're keen to tell people about at the Highland Games. In particular, we're very proud of the new northbound service to Derby." I've not been to too many Highland gatherings. Is that a typical address from a chieftain? "Let our oppressors be aware. Our hearts are free. Come join with me, comrades, on this mighty journey. The new 9:30 to Derby, stopping at Melton Mowbray." Now, one issue, of course, that has arisen here in recent years is people complaining about the latest wave of immigrants from Eastern Europe. Now, it's not for me to comment on that in any way. All I would say is that if you are descended from Scottish incomers and you're moaning that the town's being ruined by immigration, could there be a flaw in your logic? The trouble is, these Poles and Romanians come over here and they won't even integrate into the country they've moved into. They won't eat our haggis, they won't toss the caber. While I was here, it's been the anniversary of the Corby Trade and Labour Club, so I went there for a visit. And after a while, I thought the most rational explanation for this place is that I've walked through the back of a wardrobe and passed through a warp in the universe. And I'm in Glasgow in 1973. There are all these trays covered in frothy pints of McEwan's and tartan, and they're playing dominoes, and they got me to take part in a sports contest where you played bowls, pool, darts and dominoes, and you got marks for each. And at the end, I said to the bloke, "How did I do?" And he went, "Shite." Friendliest place in the country, Corby. But of all the results of Corby's Scottish Connection, there's one more spectacular than any other, because most towns are twinned with somewhere, but Corby has a crater on Mars named after it. The reason is that when Apollo 11 was on the way back from the moon, ground control at NASA were telling the crew what was in the papers that day. Now, one of the other stories was that a man had won the World Porridge Eating Championships. And the contest had been held in Corby, which of course makes sense with your Scottish ancestry. So when a crater was discovered on Mars, they remembered this conversation that they'd had, and so they named the crater Corby. And the ceremony when the crater was named, the spokesman for NASA said, "Go on then, find 30 million people with 100 miles of that Corby smart." And all of this Scottishness is due to the steelwork. So I'd like to introduce you now to Ian. You worked in the tubes, is that right?
Yeah, I was a tube works guy, yeah.
But your father was probably representative of many people in Corby, because how did he come to be here?
Well, he lived in a tenement in Aberdeen, so there was no chance of them getting a house up there, and so just made their way down here whichever way they could. Bike, they were walking, they were sleeping under hedges, because we're coming from a place where there was no work, there was no money, and this was a hope for them.
So people living under bushes?
Well, on the way down here, because if you're coming from Glasgow or from Aberdeen, it's an awful long walk, so you have to have somewhere to go.
very, very moving, I think, listening to these accounts, and also makes you very cross, because if only there'd been a railway station like every other place, you could have come by train. Presumably people were going, the nearest station's in Kettering, and though I've never heard of it yet, for some reason I instinctively hate the place. I'm not going there.
It was a bit like the Wild West. And the folk from Corby, they came down and they got their wage packet on a Friday because there was no banking in those days. You just got money in your hand, and the only thing to do was go to one of the, I think it was 6 pubs that were in the Corby village, and then it just became like the Wild West, which is why I think the rivalry between Kettering and Corby came, because they were like a little bitty posh.
Thanks very much. Give a round of applause for Ian. Thanks very much for talking to us. And the most obvious point about the steelworks to anyone who looks into it is that it was huge. At one point, 14,000 people worked there. And it wasn't just Scots. East Europeans fled from either from Hitler or Stalin to come to Corby because there was work. By the end of the 1940s, there were 400 Latvians in Corby. And they must have been so confused, mustn't they? How must they have coped with all the peculiarities Scots in England? They must... I don't understand. I try to fit in, so I say to a local person, now I'm here, I support your football team. Rar, rar, England. Look, I have flag. He headbutt me. Next day I say, sorry to offend. To make up for this, I will buy 3 trouser press from you. He headbutt me. Everything in the town was steel. Everything. I bet when you sneezed, a teaspoon come out. And you could listen to ex-steelworkers talking about working there. One woman said that you had to judge which way the wind was blowing before you sent your kids out to play, because if it was in the wrong direction, they'd come back covered with soot from the mill. And one woman who worked in the steelworks, she said, molten steel would be poured into a ladle and carried by a crane. If it tilted too much, a bit would fall out. And when it landed, it exploded in massive sparks. It was very pretty. You must have been the hardest town in Britain to impress on firework night. You could be in New York on the 4th of July and go, oh, we get bigger than that on the afternoon shift. There's a poem I read about living in Corby in the days of the steelworks, and it shows the more cheerful side of the plant. I'll read the whole poem. The smell of sulphur burning like a striking match. Suffocating smoke fills the air. Choking like fire burning in your mouth. Choking. Choking. I thought it'll perk up in a bit. And then it goes, weary bodies walking home, blackened faces looking at the ground, tired, exhausted, like empty shells. Tired. Tired. Was it a steelworks here, or was it the First World War? I thought, I reckon I can write a more upbeat version of the same thing. The steel drops down from overhead, exploding by me, molten. But all is joy, for I'm not dead, and just 100 miles from Bolton. Stewarts and Lloyds were bought and eventually made part of British Steel. Then in 1979, Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister, very popular in Corby. Now, she had a plan, which was to break the trade unions, and the union she wanted to start with was the Steelworkers Union. So they announced that they were closing half the steel industry, starting with the plant at Corby, and a national strike was called. So once it shut, there were years when people didn't really know what to do, and women became the main wage earners in a lot of families, and Glaswegian blokes loved that because they're well known for being in touch with their feminine side. In most towns, in these heritage centres, they've got little signs up and they say things like, and Stamford continues to make pots up until the current day. But the one I read here went, in Corby, glue sniffing by young people became a major headache. In the heritage centre. I love the way you manage to sound positive about anything. That's brilliant. By next week, it will say, at that time, Corby was proudly the glue-sniffing capital of the world. And if you've got one hand on the glue and one hand on the paper bag, you'll always find someone to happily hold a door open for you. This was all 30 years ago. So it's clearly recovered an enormous amount since then. There's quite a lot of industry again now, and as soon as you leave the centre of the town, you've got the Northamptonshire countryside to look around. And even though you're right next to major industry, you'll find places like Great Oakley, which is a magical place in that it makes some people think that they live there even if they don't. Oh yes, we're Great Oakley. Well, the exact address is Corby High Street, but we think of it more as North East Great Oakley. It seems the new buildings that have gone up recently weren't the first attempt at recovering from the closure of the steelworks, because there was an enterprise called Wonderworld. Wonderworld was going to be the huge leisure park. Millions were spent on it. There was going to be a huge concert bowl in the shape of a Martian tripod. There was an area of land up to the village of Weldon that was cordoned off for years. And then apparently the only thing ever actually built was a massive sign that said, "This is the plot where Wonderworld would be built." And now it's the wind farms, because a wind farm is being built at Barnwell Manor. Is that right? What do people... you got any opinions on the wind farms?
They look great in Kettering.
Wind farms even become an issue in the by-election here, didn't they? Because to start with... to be honest, Corby, you've not had a lot of luck with your MPs, have you? It's funny how the public mood swings on certain issues. Who would have thought that spending 42 grand on your kitchen and claiming it out of public money would lose your votes? And so you then did what any sensible town would do in those circumstances, got rid of him and elected Louise Mensch instead. Now, obviously there was a misunderstanding in the selection process when she first came to the constituency. She thought that it stretched from Weldon in the east to New York in the west. To be fair, she probably would say now, my 2 years there was a huge success. I was on Have I Got News for You, Daybreak, starred with Hugh Grant in the Leveson Inquiry, and if I'd lasted another month, I'd have got an 8 out of 10 cats and loose women. So some of you must have voted for her.
No, we didn't.
It was someone else, I know. This is what I've noticed that when you ask the question, who voted for Louise Mensch, Corby becomes like toddlers when you find someone's been drawing on the wall. Weren't me what done it. It was Keldon. Rockingham done it. The trickiest part, of course, like politicians trying to govern in Northern Ireland or Jerusalem, is dealing with the border and this cultural clash with Kettering. Now, like many rivalries between towns, the conflict is played out between the football clubs, because you both have a football team and Kettering's has gone bankrupt. One of the two had to, didn't it? I bet if anyone from round here goes on the Dragon's Den, the panel will just go, hello, and where are you from? Corby, I'm out. Now, here's something I'm not sure is a good business move. I've been staying at the Holiday Inn here, along the Geddington Road. Now, I know you can never be sure, but do you think many people are ever likely to go on holiday there? We thought for a change we'd have 2 weeks next to a breaker's yard in Corby. But poor Kettering Football Club have gone bankrupt. And how about this for humiliation? They have been told that to save costs they've got to play their matches at your ground. But Kettering should be honoured. They should be honoured to play at such a venue, because this is how Corby FC's website describes their ground. Still Park, home of Corby Town FC, is the last word in state-of-the-art sports venues. The last word, yeah, that's right. Barcelona, the New York Giants, they can only drool at the thought of playing at Still Park. And then it goes on, venture into the stadium and amongst the magnificent all-seater stand, you will find a press box, an executive box and director box. But it's only when you step outside into the car park you really marvel at the stadium before you. And I I can confirm, having been into that car park, that only when you're there can you imagine truly what it must have been like to stand in awe at the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. There are some even more impressive achievements than that in modern Corby. One of the square concrete buildings in the town centre has been set up as a place to do art, so kids can run around there and make dinosaurs and people do film projects there. And it was set up by Paula, who started another Corby project. So I was very impressed by the project that you set up to complain about things. What's your method of getting the town to complain?
A complaints choir.
A complaints choir?
Complaints choir, yeah. We sing our complaints, and they were collected online in the town centre, walking around the town asking people. And then I had to make songs out of them and form a choir, and we sang them here 2 weeks ago.
So can you sing a complaint for us?
Yes, I can sing "The cube's not finished and it costs far too much. The concrete walls need some paint. The library's noisy and it's all on a slope. We get wet shopping when it rains."
That's brilliant. There is an air of the 70s about parts of Corby, especially the town centre. We can't deny that, with its love of square concrete things. But there is a glint to it as well, I think. And it is now one of the fastest growing towns in Britain. And maybe that's because when the steelworks were shut, it didn't go out without a fight. And that sense of endurance must have carried through to today through some of the peculiar ways that people find about complaining when things are wrong, even if it's being in a choir. But even the Scottish connection actually goes back much further, I think, than you might realise. Because it turns out that Robbie Burns actually visited the old Corby, the Corby village, in the 1790s, and wrote a poem about it. And I will leave you with this, Corby. Ark Corby, there's nowhere more Scots in its heart and its belly, whose MP should be a wee posh lassie who loves being on telly. With a grandest tune with near railway station, if you didn't count Dudley as its one conurbation. And if ever the concrete makes you feel forlorner, I be through an Athens just round the corner. If you try to destroy us, we can be rabble-rousers, but the one thing we won't do is press ye poxy, crumpled, gobshite, wrinkled trousers.
Mark Steele's In Town was written and performed by Mark Steele with additional material by Pete St Clair. The producer was Sam Bryant.